Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Oliver Scherenberg on, and he works within licensing, legal, media, and NFTs. Hi, Oliver.
Hey, good to see you, or not see you, but talk to you. Hi, Daniel.
Good to talk to you as well, Oliver. We're really excited to have you on because I think your industry and your background is actually a really interesting space, and I don't think many people know about the licensing and that kind of world of legal and media. So, do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do, Oliver?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to share that. So, I am an attorney, so an intellectual property licensing specialist, if you so want. I went through law school in Germany. I studied in France for a year. I did my PhD in licensing and bankruptcy laws, where I compared the German and the US perspective of intellectual property licensing in bankruptcy cases. So what I do is working as an attorney in my own law firm. I was with a big law firm before, with a smaller one later, and then I created my own firm maybe 7 years ago. And my clients are from different areas of technology, for example, when I do patent licensing. So I have patent licensing companies, I have technology companies. It is trademark licensing, for example, brands like the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, or copyright or name right or image right licensing. These are more the creative people, artists, celebrities, actors, and all of that. And that last part also got me into the Web3 space. And the Web3 space, what that is, I'll explain that in a second.
Sure. So, was this always something you wanted to go into, maybe, or was it something you kind of just grew into?
I think law as such has been something I grew into. To be honest, when I was a kid, no one in my family was an attorney, so I didn't really know what the law was at all. So there are a lot of engineers in my family and less creative people, much more of, yeah, as I say, mechanical engineers or architects or things like that. And I have one older brother who is a who went into economics, and my father and grandfather and uncle and all of that, the engineers. So I thought I don't want to compete with my brother, and I don't want to try to step in someone's footsteps and become an engineer myself. So basically, the only things left were to become a doctor, a medical doctor for
Mm.
me, or an attorney. These were the only professions I really knew. And unfortunately, I was not introduced to many creative professions that I know today. Probably I would have not become an attorney if I knew them all.
So, and then going further into your legal career, what made you choose licensing?
I think after a year or two in law school, I figured out that it's all very abstract. So you need to have a high level of of skills to come up with constructions, legal constructions, and understand things that are just on paper or in your mind. And what I liked very much when I was first introduced to intellectual property law is that you have something you can see, you can feel, you can even smell. So it's a piece of art, or it's a creation, or it's a patent, something that you can really grasp. So it's something more physical or something more practical. And I mean, if that is the law that I wanted to focus on, it was only logical that I wanted to monetize whatever you can do with that asset as well. So if you are an intellectual property attorney, you're either on the infringement side, so you're the litigator, or you're on the constructive side of monetizing, and that brings you into licensing. And that has fascinated me ever since I first was in touch with that during my first internship, I think in my like second or third year of law school. And I focused on that ever since. Back then, it was the so-called new media, which is today the old media, so the internet. It was social media and even like e-commerce, and before that. And now it's, I think, just again the new media, if you so want. It's always been creative stuff and the then current new media. And new media right now for me would be the metaverse, NFTs, and blockchain technologies.
Mm. I mean, I could be completely wrong because I don't really understand this world. I'm, obviously not part of it. But since the age of social media and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of new content creators have sort of started to make things on the internet, has licensing and that whole law space around it grown? Because I am assuming maybe more people are infringing on copyrights and sort of licenses, maybe with the content they're making. I guess I'm trying to say, have you seen the space grow because more people are using more different types of media and things like that?
Yes, very, very much. At least I have seen it change over time. Let's say when I started being interested in monetizing intellectual property assets, it was patents, trademarks, and copyrights. And copyrighted material was typically there is an actor, they do a movie, and the movie is then it goes to the cinema first, then you have a DVD or something like that, and then it goes to the television. That was kind of it. Or you have a VHS video, like the cassette or something that the recording back in the very early days. And then all of that kind of changed and developed into different sorts of media that are now also interesting. The same movement with social media. I think content creators, they just added a layer of entertainment to the existing intellectual property portfolios. So they create their own stuff. First of all, they are the creators, so they are the owners of the copyrighted stuff that they produce. On the other hand, they also use copyrighted materials. For example, they play video games and stream it, or they watch movies and have watch parties, or they use someone else's content, indeed, and then we're in the infringement case. So indeed, every new media creates not only new consumers, but also new forms of intellectual property and also new scope of licensing.
Interesting. So I just want to go back a little bit to your time at university and then law school. Now we've had quite a few people that work within law come on the show, and it's fair to say that most people, I mean, you have to go to law school, right? There's no way of going. You have to go to university and then you have to go to law school. There's no other real routes into this. Is that fair to say, or have you got different experiences?
In Germany, at least, typically you start with law school. So directly when you come out of high school, you directly go to university, and at university you log into the law school, so to say. So we
Mhm.
do not have a general university time before that, but your first day in university is at law school, if you so want. So at least in Germany, back in the time when I was a law student, we had about 4 years of law school, of university. And then you have your first very big exam that you have to take. So it's 2 weeks of big exams, 5 hours each in different topics, and then you have an oral exam later. And after that, you have another 2 years of different sorts of internships. So you go to the administration, to work for the government, work for the judge, for the prosecutor, and you work for an attorney. And after these 2 years of training, you have another big exam, and only these two big exams, so the first state exam and the second state exam, qualify you to become an attorney. The funny thing is, even you are trained, at least in Germany, to become a judge, not an attorney. So back in time, the entire education was aiming at the students becoming not attorneys, which 90% of them became, but judges who like maybe only 2 to 5% of the law students can become judges, because you have to be very good and you have to be willing to work for very low salary. So it's a bit absurd. But indeed, there is no, or there has been no other way around going through law school in the traditional way. Now, the only thing you could do is to study law somewhere else and come to Germany and have your international degree accepted here and transferred into you becoming admitted also to the German bar. But otherwise, you
Mm.
would really have to go through law school.
You mentioned a moment ago things like watch parties and games being streamed and that, and it's a world I'm quite interested in because I see things happen where, for instance, watch parties, or people streaming certain games, and then like 2 weeks later, you hear all over Twitter they've been banned or there's been a ban wave come out. But how quick is the actual industry at actually changing things that they want to sort of protect themselves against? Is it quite like an overnight, like, or someone's abusing what we own? How can we protect ourselves better? Or is it quite a slow, methodical process?
I think it is always necessary that you are detected when you're doing something wrong. So at least in Germany, we have a saying, you probably have something like that. If there will be no judge if there is no plaintiff, which means if you don't do anything wrong, you will never be pursued. If you do something wrong and you will not get caught, it's the same thing. So it's just when you do something wrong and someone who has the right to tell you that you're not supposed to do that catches you, then you will be in trouble. So if you live stream to an audience, it's pretty obvious that someone may notice if you stream someone else's content without their permission. Which means if you do a watch party, for example, if you show in your live stream just content that is copyrighted, and every content is copyrighted, so you probably should really be very careful about that, then you either have to go through a platform which allows you to do the watch party. And that, for example, as far as I know, if you do it on Twitch and you use Amazon, because as far as I know, they are part of Amazon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So you can share part of your Amazon content with your Twitch audience to a certain extent. As far as I know, I'm not a full expert, but that's how far I know watch parties work. But it would certainly not work that you said you put on the TV and just live stream the TV, whatever is on, or you live stream someone else's content, which is not through Amazon. That would simply be a copyright infringement, which means if you want to do stuff using someone else's content, you always have to be mindful. And if you're on a platform that does not support that, like outside of Twitch, I would imagine it's more problematic, then better not do it, because you probably will be caught sooner or later.
And what would you say are maybe 3 key skill sets that somebody thinking of going into your industry would need?
My industry being intellectual property licensing, I would assume.
Yes.
I think a certain interest in technology would be very helpful. A certain interest in also communication is probably something useful, and I would even say an abstract desire of wanting to help people get things right. But that's probably at least for every attorney who does contract drafting. One thing that I like very much about being an attorney on the transactional side is that you typically don't have to solve disputes right away, but you have to anticipate that people may be in trouble later, and you want to anticipate the solution for the dispute they may have or they may want to avoid in the future. So most of the time, it's a very constructive approach you can have. So people who want to become negotiators or contract drafters need a certain creativity, but also a certain sense of wanting to find compromises for people.
And on the same vein, what would be some key personality traits that you think can really help someone succeed in this industry?
Sorry, can you come again, please? I didn't get
some personality traits.
Personality traits. I'm sorry. Yes, well, personality traits. Let's say if you want to negotiate, if you want to be in a room with people to defend interests or to fight for interests, I think it makes sense that you have a certain outgoing characteristic type of personality. I think it is useful that you can listen to people and listen to what they want, what they need to be able to represent them properly. But it's also important to speak up when you think you have to disagree with something. So people who are hiding behind the bushes too much may not be in the best position to be negotiators, I think. And people who are not interested in the technology and the development of new industries are probably also not very well suited to become an attorney, at least with a developing skill set in new industries.
And let's talk a bit about the NFT space, because we mentioned it at the beginning. You've become sort of fascinated with this whole Web3 NFT space. How did you get into it, and what are you doing within the space?
Yeah, I was introduced to it first by a friend, I think 5 years ago or so, who is an IT specialist and a strategic advisor for many IT companies or companies with an IT focus. And she told me something about people who wanted to trade expensive wines And expensive wines typically are taken out of the box, brought to an auction, sold at the auction, transported to another country, put in the cellar, removed from the cellar, taken to the next auction, which is terrible for wine. So what she said and what she developed for this one customer was a possibility of trading these wines without taking the wine out of the best environment suitable for that expensive wine, which is a cellar at the right temperature. So she developed a substitute for the physical asset, which is a digital asset, the non-fungible token, identifying one individual piece of property, in this case, the bottle of wine. And that later became the idea of the NFT, of the digital asset as well. And that completely fascinated me because I thought having an ownership representation on an immutable chain, like on the blockchain, that was something that I haven't heard before, and it did solve quite a lot of other issues that I had in mind. And therefore, when I saw the NFT space, so the non-fungible token space, as we know it today, with the digital items, with the digital artworks, picture projects, artwork projects, when I saw that develop, especially last year, I thought that might be something I should dive into much deeper. I started investing a little bit, and I also had clients that started asking questions about it. And the more the questions came, the more I wanted to know, because obviously if you are an attorney and cannot answer questions that your clients have, they will go somewhere else. And that doesn't make sense. So everything I told you before about being fascinated about new technologies and seeing something that you can license came together. So for me, it was just a natural development to dig deep into the Web3 space, the NFT space, blockchain, also metaverse applications. And that is how I started while smarting myself up, having connections, and then having client relations, and also speaking, writing, and talking about it.
I'm fascinated by this whole space, but that wine NFT thing sounds absolutely brilliant. Do you know if that's still a product, or if that's still going?
To be honest, I don't know, because while this lady is still a friend of mine, we have actually never spoken about that project anymore, and I don't even know whether it was flying. I'm pretty sure that something like that came to the market later, but I would really have to dig into it. Now you make me interested in it again. I will dig it out.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But as this world grows, I guess there's going to be a whole new, like we spoke previously, and you said, the internet was a whole new wash of media that made sort of licensing fresh, and there was lots to do in it. I guess Web3 is going to be even bigger, right? There's going to be an even more need for licensing and that kind of expertise, I guess.
I would assume so, yes. At this stage where we are right now, this entire, let's say blockchain is not in the early stage anymore. Blockchain is already something that is relatively mature, but the use cases that come with new blockchains, with this special Ethereum blockchain, which is the most popular one, that introduced not only tokens as a currency, but tokens as something that is connected to a so-called smart contract, where you can have self-executing commands that you predetermine. So if A happens, then B happens automatically, and you can determine that. So you may not need in transactions where you typically have several parties and an intermediary, you don't need that intermediary anymore. You will be able to have transactions very transparent, very fluid, and at a very high pace at a certain extent, and that will be repeating while you will be able to repeat transactions in a way that you could not do that today. You will have new use cases, and it will be very important how to license that in the future. Today, most of the intellectual property is copyright and trademark, a little bit of patent as well. But the future use cases will bring a lot of more challenges, especially also when it comes to privacy law, to regulatory law, and to other things that you want to license, not only copyrighted material.
And what would you say has been the biggest positive that you've taken so far out of your career? Something you've gone, wow, I can't believe I've done that or been involved with that, or just, maybe it's something you've got great satisfaction from doing your job.
I think it depends very much on on the client that you work for. So clients can be very fascinating. For me, one of my favorite clients, I have to say, is the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So this environmental organization, I work a lot with them here in Germany, especially when it comes to licensing and co-branding the panda logo. So for example, if you have a supermarket chain and they want to become more sustainable in what they do and have more sustainable products, and they fulfill a certain catalog of requirements, then they may get as a reward, so to say, the panda logo that they can put on the milk carton, for
Oh,
example.
wow.
And through that time working with WWF, I have been involved in so many absolutely fascinating projects. But to be honest, it's more the project that was fascinating than the legal aspect. I have other clients where it's the other way around, where the client is absolutely not fascinating because you may even question what they're doing, but the legal stuff that they're doing is super groundbreaking and very exciting. So you sometimes have to balance whether you are doing it for the fun, for the project, or for the legal stuff and for the enthusiasm about complicated legal structures. But I like it. I like it all, and I like that it's well, it's a very colorful profession, I think. You can deal with other people's problems and try to solve them. Um, I think that's a pretty cool description of what attorneys should be doing, and well, I'm rather fascinated by that.
Yeah. For you though, having worked in this industry, what are some of the biggest challenges you've found working within it?
The challenges could be that it is very difficult to find people to work for you. To be quite honest, it is hard to find young attorneys that are also in the same way fascinated as you are or as I am. There has been quite a shift in what attorneys expect from their job, or probably everyone expected from their job. And it also takes a while to understand that so the husband-wife thing is different than 30 years ago. The man-woman thing is different than 30 years ago. The job and leisure time is different than a couple of years ago. And all of that makes it, from my perception, more difficult to find people that want to do the same stuff you want to do. And it sounds almost a bit weird because I think that we can offer super interesting environments. We can offer a lot of flexibility in the job. But well, some attorneys still accept people to work around the clock, to work for over the weekend, to be available all the time. And it's just developed. I mean, I've been in the legal industry now for almost 20 years altogether. And if you see the development back then, when I was a young attorney, it was absolutely impossible to take the time off because your kid was born. It was really that you simply wouldn't do that. It would harm your career. And today it is absolutely logical that everyone does that. And if they don't do it, you almost have to force them to do it because they should. And still, it's not easy to find people who want to work for you. Maybe that's a problem of small law firms more than bigger law firms. But I've heard about that from other people as well.
You mentioned earlier it's kind of difficult to find young people that want to go into the industry. But when you are looking for someone to hire, what are some key qualities you're actually looking for in those people?
Yeah, so I've tried for about a year now to find people, and I've gone through every route that I could imagine. I've posted several job alerts on LinkedIn where I have a couple of thousand followers, so I thought that might attract people. I even went the very traditional style and had print advertising in some legal journals. I had newspaper ads. I spoke on conferences and really was not shy of saying, "Hey, anyone in here who's looking for a job, I need an associate." And it simply has not worked. And I'm not sure why that is the case. If there were simply no lawyers around, which is possible, or whether I haven't found the right words to address people. So what I said is what I wanted is, I want people who are not necessarily the best in their class, but they are interested. I don't necessarily want people who are pushing pens, but they should be eager to learn. I don't want people who work around the clock, but I want you to have fun in life and to be a responsible person also in the environment and also for society. And what I really want you to do is to spend time with your family. So I know, for example, that that kids, I think in Germany, they have 16 weeks of school holidays, something like that, 16 or 18 weeks. And I know in other countries it's even more. So I think it would only make sense that you should take the entire time off whenever your kids are on holidays. Why should you not spend time with your kids? I mean, how does it work? Typically, you have a couple of weeks for the husband and a couple of weeks for the mother, or for the mother and the father, and the rest of the time the kids are in some camps, or they're home alone, or they're with the grandparents or the neighbors or whatever. So I thought that was quite an attractive job description, and still I haven't found anyone. So I said, I know, I understand you can take up to 20 weeks off every year, because that is probably what your kids should be the time off.
Yeah,
and still hasn't worked. What is
Oliver,
going on? What's
we're
even
both
happening?
we're both not lawyers, but we will come and work for you if you
We
like.
don't have kids either. We still want the 20 weeks.
Well, then you don't qualify for the job. You don't have kids, I'm afraid. No, but it's really funny. So, to be quite honest again, I really think that people should have a very balanced work-life approach. I would expect people to spend time with their family, to spend time with things they are interested in, like their own hobbies, their sports, whatever it is. Society, obviously, just not for themselves. Yeah, and still hard to find the people.
How interesting. Would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Absolutely, I would, but maybe I would come from the other side. I would probably rather come from the creative side and not from the legal side.
Well, Oliver, it's been a genuine pleasure chatting to you this evening. Thank you so much for coming on and telling everyone your story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really a pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Where can people find you? Maybe even your company and any job roles you've got going.
Job offer. So my law firm is called Scherenberg Legal and Licensing, and Scherenberg is hard to spell, but maybe you will find it somewhere. They can contact me on the webpage of our law firm, or especially also on LinkedIn, where I'm rather active, and that's also the only social media that I'm using. So it's Oliver Scherenberg on LinkedIn, or it's web3lex.io, which is a platform that we run for legal information about Web3.
Brilliant. Thanks, Oliver.
Absolutely.